Hey everybody, Aaron Counts, Sage Dynamics. I'm wearing a ridiculous hat and I got out a bad sweater, so that must mean it's time for the annual bourbon episode. That's right, something that became kind of a tradition is every year I do an episode on bourbons that I've tried throughout the year. I am a bourbon and whiskey connoisseur, prefer that over beer generally. And people ask me questions about it from time to time because they know I'm kind of into it, and that's just another way that we can connect with our community, because it seems like a lot of pro 2A people are also lovers of fine alcohol. So without further ado, here's what's going on with me for bourbon over the past year. What may come to a surprise to some of you, Jack Daniels, something I hadn't really messed with for a long time. Mainly my first years in the Army, Jack Daniels was a fine companion. But I kind of revisited it recently. Something I'm not going to drink straight. I'm not going to put on ice. I'm not going to mix with whiskey tumblers or anything like that. But mixed with a Diet Coke, it is quite delicious. So Jack Daniels, who would have thought, right? For those of you who know me or who've caught previous bourbon episodes, you know I'm a fan of Bullitt. And yes, it is pronounced Bullitt. You can ask the guy, it's his last name. That's how it's pronounced. For some reason, the very first bourbon episode where I mentioned Bullitt, somebody said I was pronouncing his name wrong, which would come as a shock to Mr. Bullitt, because it's pronounced Bullitt. Kind of go for the 10-year now. I still like the traditional Bullitt, and it's kind of strange for me to like Bullitt in general because it does have a higher rye content than some of the other bourbons and whiskeys out there, but I don't like rye-specific bourbon or whiskey. But the 10-year is a lot smoother, and if you want to, it mixes very well. You can make, your whiskey sours, or even an old-fashioned with Bullitt 10-year is a good way to go. Another shocker is Redemption. It has a high rye content, but it's pretty mellow. It does have close to like a casky type aftertaste, but it's not so overpowering that it's going to make me want to throw the whole bottle away and regret ever buying it, which is something that I've done with some bourbons and some whiskeys in the past that had that higher rye content or tasted like they were aged in a dirt sack buried in a ditch beside the road somewhere. So I didn't really have that happen. This is my second bottle of Redemption this year. I haven't cracked this one open yet, but I definitely will at some point. When I bought the Title 21, I fully expected it to be this year's bad bourbon experience. I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of it based on, I wouldn't call it lowbrow, but very topical branding for, liquor, Title 21, Prohibition Act and all that. But I was pleasantly surprised. It's actually a really good, just basic level, maybe bottom shelf drink. You can drink it straight on ice or neat if you like to, although I don't really care for the almost like a white whiskey aftertaste when it's room temperature. So it's something I'm definitely gonna put on ice, and I know some people are super critical about the way they drink their bourbon, the way they drink their whiskey, the way they drink their scotch. Everybody's like, oh, you should always drink it neat, or you should only drink it with, whiskey stones, or you should only mix it with this, or mix it with that, or you should only mix it with ice. I prefer to try it both ways depending on what kind of mood I'm in. There's no reason why you shouldn't mix a whiskey or a bourbon, throw some ice cubes in it, because you may get a different flavor experience, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds of pretentious wine behavior, but sometimes the melting of the ice does tend to mellow and change the flavor of the drink, which can be appealing to certain people, myself included. My favorite bourbon whiskey for this year actually came very recently. I had an alumni recently gone through a pistol class up in Tennessee, and he gave me this Wheaton's. I'm gonna go with Wheaton's because it's got an A in it, but the English language is destroyed, so I'm not really sure if that's how you pronounce it, but it's this. This stuff's really good. It reminds me a lot of Blade & Bow, which reminds me a lot of Blanton's, which Blade & Bow used to be a cheaper alternative for the same flavor profile that you were going to get from Blanton's, and Blade & Bow for some people is more common to find than Blanton's. My local liquor store, which carries a very large selection of whiskey, bourbon, scotch, all that, they don't carry this. So I'm going to have to find out where to get it when I finish this bottle, because this is definitely something I'm going to be keeping on my row of 5. I had a very large bourbon and whiskey collection there for a while, and I slowly just let it dwindle down because I'm just not as adventurous as I used to be, and I also don't need to be, trying to try a new whiskey or bourbon by the bottle every single week. Not that I actually drink that much, but the collection got pretty large. So I've dwindled it down to 5 kind of standard that I'll keep on hand, and then every now and then I'll purchase a bottle of something I don't recognize. Maybe it's new, maybe I've just never seen it before, and try it out. And of course, students occasionally gift me their preferred bourbon, their preferred whiskey, or something they think that I would like. So I've got that going for me, which is cool. I don't actually have a bad bourbon for this year. Usually with this video, you do get my stay away from this choice, but this year, like I said, I wasn't being as adventurous when it comes to trying new things, so I didn't run into anything that I would tell you to steer away from, which, you know, that's kind of hard to do because there's a lot of bad bourbon and bad whiskey out there. But I'm pleased to support that I didn't run into anything this year that I'd have to tell you to stay away from, and even more pleased that I didn't spend money on something that I was just going to throw away after giving you a cautionary tale of why not to drink it. If you've got any bourbon recommendations, whiskey recommendations for me, definitely drop them in the comment section below. I'm Eric Allen with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.